Woohoo! Hello, Podfest people. Hi, gang. Hopefully this is working. I've been thinking a lot in these crazy times that we're in about Chris's book, Start Ugly. And going live in this group for the first time definitely feels like an example of starting ugly. This is not something I do very often, but I've had a lot of fun practicing, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this topic today. So for anyone who hasn't seen me at any of the previous Podfests before, I'm Robin Sales with Launching Your Success. And one of the things that I do is help podcasters and content creators with brand story and brand messaging. But one of the other things that I do and have done is improv. So this year's Podfest, my pal Glenn and I did an improv session, and we had a lot of fun with it. Glenn is quite literally on the front lines of keeping up with the Corona coverage in the horse world, so he couldn't join me today. So I'm going to carry the torch for both of us, and we're going to talk today about the improv mindset. So I'm going to hang out for a couple of minutes here, or a minute, and see if we can't get a couple more eyeballs on the screen, and then we will move forward. I'm loving this technology. This little banner down there, makes me feel very newsworthy and official. All right, so we're going to talk about the improv mindset today. I'm going to talk about the improv mindset today and then open it up to some question and answer for you. Because I am still getting to know some of this technology a little bit. Let's do just a little bit of rule setting, for lack of a better word. I'm going to go through some key points, and then I'm going to go through your comments and questions at the end. So add your questions now in the comments, but please know that in order to keep me on track, I'm going to wait and I'm going to go look through all those questions and comments at the end. So bear with me while we collect everything, and then I'll try to answer it all at the end. I will answer questions that I feel like I can answer in this live format. And then if there's anything that needs more of a deep dive, I will answer in the comments after the live session, or I'll reach out to you individually to get you the answers and the information that you need. So as I'm talking about the improv mindset, please feel free to drop your questions and your comments below, and then I'll do a little bit of Q&A at the end. All right, so let's get started today talking about the improv mindset. And when it comes to the improv mindset, I really do want to focus on that part of it, the mindset part of it. I don't want to dwell too much on the specific rules and concepts of improv. I want to talk about how understanding these rules, like using yes and never saying no, can create a mindset and a way of thinking for you that I think is really relevant and really applicable given the unique and business is unusual situation that we're all in right now. So the first thing I want to talk to you about in regards to the improv mindset is I want to make sure that everybody understands, especially if you're not very familiar with improv or you only have a small familiarity with improv. Improv is not the same as winging it. So when we think of the idea of winging it, we think of going in cold, going in unprepared, walking in with little to no preparation and figuring it out as you go along. And because of the spontaneous nature of improv, when we watch improv, we tend to think that it's people who are just really good at winging it, but it's not. The concept of winging it and improv is very, very different. And improv actually requires a lot of preparation. When you're watching a really good improv troupe, or if you've ever watched the show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? The reason that they look so effortless, the reason that it seems so spontaneous is because that team has put in hundreds, if not thousands of hours of preparation and practice before you see what you see on the stage or on the screen. They look so effortless and spontaneous because they know each other really well. They've done the work. They've come in prepared. They know where they can go and where they can't go. They know what things to say to the other person to elicit a certain response. So in order for it to look effortless and flow on the audience side, there is a significant amount of preparation that's required on the performance side. So when this comes to content creation and communicating with our audience in uncertain times, the more prepared you are for the different scenarios, the more effortless and spontaneous you can be with your communication. One of the things I say all the time is be prepared so that you don't have to be. And I want to give you an example of what that means. So I want you to think of giving a presentation. So if you're giving a speech at a conference like PodFest, you may prepare a slide deck. And the slide deck, the preparation of the slide deck in and of itself isn't enough. That slide deck or that agenda, maybe if you've got an agenda or a list of bullet points that you want to make sure you go over in your podcast, that is your roadmap to take your audience from point A to point B. But if you are also reliant upon that roadmap in order to get yourself from point A to point B, when things go wrong, if technical problems happen and you get bumped off of your roadmap, now everybody's lost, right? And so the next place to go beyond just having the roadmap is to be so familiar with the slides, be so familiar with your notes, with your bullet points that you don't need them. They're there to guide you just in case, but you want to be familiar enough with them prior to that you actually don't need them. So if something happens, if the projector stops working and nobody can see your slides, are you familiar enough with them that you can keep going anyways? You can figure out how to make it work. If a technical glitch happens while you're recording your podcast, if, the dog runs in and snatches the notes out of your hand and eats them, my dog literally ate my homework. Are you familiar enough with your notes and with your bullet points that you don't need them, that you can still find a way to move forward? And that's really the key concept here, is being prepared enough that you actually don't need the things that helped you prepare. The other key concept I wanted to share with you guys today is, and I think it's maybe the most relevant right now, and that is see what could be. When you're trained in improv, when we're trained in improv, the concept of yes and, you always have to say yes and you can never say no. And following those rules puts you in the frame of mind that I think every trained improver looks around and sees every object, not only for what it is, but for what it could be. So for example, if I'm in a scene with someone and they hand me a ruler and say, here, take your sword, right? I have to accept. I have to say yes and I have to take that ruler and I have to pretend it's a sword. I have to see this ruler as the sword that it could be, not the ruler that it is. And if we look around us, we may not have the things that we're used to. Being at home and using our at-home equipment may not be the same as the studio equipment that we're used to. But if we stop seeing it just as it is and we start looking at it as what it could be, that opens up a whole world of possibilities. One example I like to give, if you're familiar with the movie A Bug's Life from Disney, it's an old Disney Pixar movie called A Bug's Life. You don't have to have seen the movie for this reference to make sense, but there's a scene in the movie where the main character is trying to communicate an idea through a metaphor to a younger bug. And he wants to talk about the idea of a seed growing and blooming, but he can't find a seed. So what he does is he picks up a small rock and he hands it to the little bug and he says, imagine it's a seed. And her response is, but it's a rock. And he says, no, I know it's a rock. Just imagine it's a seed. And then he gives the whole metaphor about growth and about growing. And he delivers this really amazing concept, right? And at the end, she just looks at him and says, but it's a rock, right? All of that information, all of that learning, everything that could have been didn't get through because she wasn't prepared to see what could be. And so here's another concept. These things build upon each other. So not only do you have to see what could be and imagine what could be, but you also have to prepare your audience for what could be. That little bug couldn't get past the fact that what he wanted her to pretend was a seed was just a rock because he didn't prepare her. He didn't do the work in advance. So, for example, I want you to imagine that you have to give a presentation to a room full of children, and you're going to give them that same analogy about, even a tiny seed can grow into a really big tree. And so you want each of these kids to hold a seed and imagine it growing into that large tree. Only, shipments are slowed down because of the coronavirus, and your shipment of seeds didn't arrive, and you don't have anything to put in their hand. And so you look around and you think about what things could be, and maybe you have a bag of aquarium rocks, right? So instead of seeds, now you've got these aquarium rocks, and you want to put one of those in each one of those kids' hands and deliver that same analogy. But before you can do that, you have to prepare them for it. So maybe you take them through an exercise before you even start to introduce the concept. You have them close their eyes and you have them visualize what a seed does, what a seed looks like, how a seed could sprout and bloom and grow into a tree. You take them on that journey ahead of time. You prepare their minds for seeing what could be, and then you give them the substitute. And now they have the ability to substitute this little aquarium rock for the seed. They have the ability to go on that journey with you and imagine and see what could be. But that doesn't happen unless you put in the work ahead of time and you bring them on that journey with you. So not only do you need to see what could be, but you need to prepare your audience for what could be as well. Bring them along. The playing field has been leveled across the board. We're all in uncharted territory. We are all in uncharted territory doing new and interesting things. And your audience is right there with you in this scenario. So bring them along with you for the ride and imagine how things could be and what you can take that you already have and turn it into and reapply it to the next big thing. The important key here is to focus on what's there, not what's missing. And I think there's so much of that discussion happening right now. I see so many posts and comments on social media and even in, Zoom calls that I'm having with peers in the community. We're having a hard time right now getting past what we don't have instead of focusing on what we do have. And so a big part of the improv mindset is it doesn't matter what we don't have. What do we have right now, and how can we use it to further this scene, to further this story? And so I want you to take that same approach to moving forward in your business and with your content. What do you have, and how can you use it? And try to, as much as possible, let go of what's not there, what's missing. And that leads me to my final point when it comes to the improv mindset. And this is really critical in improv being funny and successful, is you can't dwell on the negative. You cannot dwell on the negative. In my earlier example, if somebody handed me a ruler and told me it was a sword, and I said, that's not a sword, that's a ruler, scene's over, done. Now, not only are we not having fun, but the audience isn't having fun watching it either. You can't dwell on the negative. You can acknowledge it and move past it and figure out where to go from there. There is a yes and for every situation, even when it doesn't seem like it. But I think if we all can find ways to apply improv thinking and that improv mindset to our particular situations, we can find a yes and. We can find a way to make whatever we have and whatever circumstance we're in, we can find a way to figure out how to make it move forward, and bring our audiences on the journey with us. So yes, and there's a yes and for every situation. Never say no. Don't dwell on the negative. Focus on what you have, not what's missing. See what those things could be. Bring your audience on that journey with you, and prepare for all the alternate scenarios as much as possible. And that's what's going to get you through these weird, uncharted times that we're in right now. So having said that, we have some time for questions. I'm going to click over here and see if we've got anything. Hey, Ross. Dwell equals how long? Oh, so if I understand that question correctly, dwell equals how long? I would say there's actually, this is a little outside of improv, but there's actually a coaching methodology known as inside out coaching. And I want you to think of the concept of, if you as a person who's trying to get something across, you're trying to get the attention of your audience. If you think of their amount of attention as a glass of water that already has some water in it, and your information, the attention you want them to give to you, is you adding more water to that glass. If you're not paying attention, if you don't give them the opportunity to dump out some of the water before you add yours, it's just going to spill over, and that person's not going to retain anything. So from that coaching philosophy, the idea is to give people the opportunity to get some of what they're feeling, talk and address the situation as it is now, and get some of that off of their chest and out of their brains, so that there's room now for everything else. There's room to be entertained. There's room to be educated. There's room for us to have a productive conversation, because we took the time to address, the circumstances that we're now in. But you can't let somebody dwell there, because then it just becomes a complaining session, right? So how long dwelling is, I think, depends on your circumstance and your audience, but giving people what you feel like is enough time to sort of go, ugh, this sucks. Yes, it does suck. Okay, now how do we move forward, right? And give them just a little opportunity to empty that glass, so that you can put new information into that glass. I hope that answered the question. It's not an easy thing to answer. There's, just like there's no perfect length of time for a podcast, there's no perfect length of time to allow someone to empty their glass so that they can accept new things into it. I think understanding your audience and using your best judgment is going to be key there. Somebody said the rock, but it's a rock. Yeah. I even myself, I've had moments where I'm like, but, and but doesn't work when we're all trying to pivot and figure out how to move forward. We have to say yes, and yes, it's a rock, and I can imagine it is a seed. And what do I need to do to pretend that it is a seed? And I think if we're all stopping for a second and asking ourselves, yes, and how can I do this next thing, or imagine it's something else? The things that I'm used to aren't there or aren't available. Yes, and there are things that are still available to me. There are things that I can still do. And what does that look like? And how do I make that work? And I think if we can, again, adopt that mindset and make those small little pivots, we can see that there's still plenty of audience out there for us who really do want to hear from us right now. And we can figure out the best way to bring our information to them. Somebody says, I am so bad about the yes, and I am a yes, but. Okay, but. It's a hard habit to break. Awareness is the first step. So, now hopefully after today, you'll be listening to yourself more and catching yourself. There's nothing wrong with starting to go in the wrong direction, catching yourself and going, hang on, actually, we want to go this way. I think about Willy Wonka, in the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where he's like, hold on, flip that, reverse it, and he just brought the kids with him when he started to go the wrong way. I think we can do that too. If you're more of a yes, but person, it's okay to catch yourself saying yes, but hold on. Actually, I mean, yes, and. Back in my learning and development days, one of my bosses taught me that what but really means is forget everything I said before this. Like, hey, Robin, you're doing well, but I really want you to work on this one thing. That but tells my brain, forget everything else they just said and only focus on the second half of it. And so maybe if you think of that but like that, I'm sorry for anyone who walked in at that exact sentence. If you remember that saying but tells the other person to forget everything that came before that but, that might help you make the transition to saying and instead of but. In case you really want them to forget everything that you just said before that. So those of you out there who have someone who says but to you a lot, I want you to start thinking about the context in which they use that. Maybe they're trying to tell you something. Tool to overcome worry. I don't know that overcoming worry is the right thing. Improv in that scenario, if anything, gives us the tools to accept the worry and work through it versus overcoming it. And again, I think my answer comes from an improv mindset. Maybe the goal isn't to overcome because that would be really difficult for a lot of us right now. Maybe the tool is to accept and doing things like focusing on what I have versus what's missing and seeing the things that I have for what they could be and what I could turn it into. I don't have the ability to do things the way I used to, but what do I have the ability to do? And how can I still reach my audience? Worry is a part of that. Worry should be a part of that, and use those tools to work through that worry and accept it more than trying to overcome it. Let's get into brain science for a second here related to that. You know, our brains send us signals, our bodies send us signals, and let me reverse that. I'm going to pull a Willy Wonka. Hold on, stop that, reverse it. Our bodies send our brain signals, and our brain knows how to receive the signals, but it doesn't always know how to interpret the signals. And so we're all aware of the concept of fight or flight or freeze. The part of your brain, the amygdala, that receives that and sets off that warning light, it's just giving you a warning light. It's not telling you to fight, to flight, or to freeze. It's just warning you that you have to make one of those decisions. And I think many times we just don't know how to interpret those signals. And so one of the things that one of my theater teachers taught me is that when your body is sending you all of those signals, that your immediate thought is, I'm nervous, I'm nervous, I'm nervous, right? And so if you interpret all those signals as I'm nervous, then you start to get worried. Your stomach starts to churn. You start to tell yourself, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I couldn't do this. She taught me to recognize those signals and instead tell myself, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. So it's the same signals, we're just interpreting them differently. I'm not nervous, I'm excited, right? And now I can take that energy and I can do something different with it. I can react to it in a different way. And so I think the improv mindset allows us to take those things like worry and just use that energy in a different way rather than trying to overcome or avoid it. That was a really long answer. I hope it felt like a thorough answer to the person who asked that question. It doesn't always tell me who's asking the question, FYI. So I'm sorry I'm not addressing you directly by name. What about accepting and redefining? Accept the ruler as a weapon, but redefine it from something to a sword to a dagger. Absolutely. That's the beauty of yes and. One of the examples I use all the time in helping people understand the concept of not saying no is if we started a scene and somebody came to me and said, oh my goodness, look at that. It's a pterodactyl flying by, right? If I had no comfort or no knowledge about dinosaurs or pterodactyls, I might be really nervous to try to figure out where to take that scene. I don't know about dinosaurs. I don't know how to take that information and run with it, right? But I can't say no. So I have to accept that this person said there's a pterodactyl flying in the air. Where can I go with it, right? So I can accept it. And instead of taking the story in the direction that that person might have intended, I can still take it in a direction that's comfortable for me. So I might say, yes, and clearly you forgot to take your meds today, you know? So in a way, I'm saying, no, there's not a pterodactyl there, but I'm not using negative. I'm not saying no, and I'm not shutting the scene down. So there are ways to sort of accept what's given to us. And again, repurpose it, use it in a different way that's still productive and still moves things forward. We are coming up on a half an hour. I don't want to belabor the point. One of the great things about improv is it's quick, it's to the point, and then we're out and we move on, and it allows us to pivot. I just want you to keep in mind that whatever your plans were for 2020, they might be completely upside down. And I'm in the same boat with you. And a lot of the people in this group, a lot of the people in your life are in that same boat. But instead of dwelling on the fact that that roadmap is now worthless, what are the alternate routes? What do I have? What can I use? And how can I put it into place and turn it into something moving forward? We have the tools, and it's just a few mindset shifts. So yes, and don't say no, say yes, and figure out how to move forward. Again, I think more than anything, what I find myself doing a lot right now is focusing on what I do have. What do I have available? Who do I have around me? How can I still reach out to clients and community? How can I still serve people, even if it doesn't look or feel like what it used to? And I think if we can just focus on what we do have and imagine what it could be and start using yes and to move in that direction, we'll find that we have much more options than we thought we did. So I hope this was helpful for everybody. Also, too, I am at your service. So if I can do anything for you, if you need some advice on transitioning to mobile and online platforms, if you need some advice on reinterpreting how stuff works in the time of Corona, if you just want someone to send you goofy memes to take your mind off of all the craziness that's happening around you, please feel free to reach out. And I'm reaching out to my support. Please consider me one of your support and reach out. That's how we're going to get through this, is by helping one another. So I'm here for you, and please give me, please reach out and let me know what I can do for you, how I can help you. So thank you guys very much for your eyeballs and your attention today. Yes, and we are all going to get through this. I'll see you guys around. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.